Okay, good morning. Being one of the few real transport people on the board, dig, I know what it is to stay on time. So I am determined to get back on schedule today, so I have till 11:45. Yeah. Okay. Overtime progress report. Oh, first we have to see if there are any public speakers. I'm sorry.
Madam Chairman, there are no public speakers.
Okay, and there aren't any changes to the work plan this month?
No, there are not.
Okay, all in favor? Okay. Now, oh, you don't want to do overtime right away? You want to wait? We'll do it in the order? Yeah. Okay. So now I would like John Hine to discuss the operations report.
Good morning.
You didn't have anything.
Good morning. The performance highlights for the month of July are on page 9 and 10 of the committee book. Overall combined bus MDBF was down 9.3% in July of 10 compared to July of 09 levels. July 10 was a month with 16 days in excess of 90-degree temperatures, which greatly contributed to the decrease in MDBF for the month. However, the combined 12-month average MDBF through July of 10 was up 2.6% compared to the prior 12-month average. July bus service performance measures declined slightly. Combined AM weekday pullouts were 99.10% and combined PM weekday pullouts were 99.40% for the month of July. For the previous 12 months, combined AM weekday pullouts were 99.14 and combined PM weekday pullouts were 99.37. Completed trips were 98.40 for the month of July and 98.47 for the previous 12 months. To present the safety performance, I'll introduce Steve Vidal.
Thank you, John. In conjunction with our comments on the June safety performance listed on page 11, I wanted to update the committee on initiatives impacting customer accidents and injuries as well as lost time accidents. Earlier this year, the committee book noted significant increases in lost time accidents across the 3 bus companies, as well as a rise in both customer accidents and customer accident injuries at New York City Transit. Following the committee chair's request at the May meeting, we presented corrective actions which had been implemented to address these areas. We feel these efforts have been successful, as evidenced by the positive overall results indicated on page 11. We'll continue our efforts so that we can sustain the improved performance that we're seeing in lost time accidents as well as in customer accidents and customer accident injuries. Specific to the June 2010 performance, overall the 12-month rate for combined bus collisions per million miles traveled across the 3 bus units was up by 2.1% from last year. Most notable was an increase in February, March, and April that was addressed through a series of initiatives that included safety blitzes, shop gates, and increased onboard observations. Improved performance was then observed over the following 4 months. The 12-month rate for bus collision injuries per million miles rose by 13.5%. Currently, 13 accidents involving 5 or more injuries are under investigation by the Public Transportation Safety Board. There appear to be a number of accidents involving minimal, if any, property damage, in which the number of injuries being claimed is not consistent with the circumstances of the accident. We have shared this information with Transit's law department so that they can flag these claims, so that any claims that might arise from these accidents. Further, as the PTSB investigations are finalized, we'll make every effort to incorporate related findings into our safety and training initiatives. The 12-month rate for customer accidents is up 4% over the prior 12-month period, and the rate for customer accident injuries is also up slightly by 1% over the same period. However, the customer accident rate for the month of June was 19.3% better than June of 2009, and the customer accident injury rate was 12.9% better than in June of 2010 compared to 2009. We look forward to continuing improvements in this area. The 12-month rate for employee on-duty lost time accidents is up by 8.6% from the 2009 level. However, the lost time accident level for the month of June was 14% better than June 2009, marking the 5th consecutive month of improvement. As I mentioned at the July committee meeting, changes were made to the Long Island bus safety reporting to standardize measurements of data, and year-over-year comparisons will not accurately reflect trends until the full reporting periods are integrated. This is why Long Island bus data reflects negative trends in all 5 safety categories. Now I'd like to introduce Steve Lopiano, who is sitting in for Tom Charles this month to present the Paratransit information.
You have June statistics, and in the book there's some July statistics. In New York City Transit, we have August statistics. Can't you get a little more up to dater?
Yeah. In transit, safety statistics have an extra 1-month lag because they review different accidents. So typically, we present safety data that's 1 month behind everything else: ridership, revenue, expenses, operations information.
Good morning. I will begin with the Paratransit Report on page 13. Accessoride Paratransit ridership increased by 3.3% for the month of July. Able Ride was down 17% compared to July 2009 levels. The Able Ride decreases reflect the elimination of non-ADA trips implemented at the end of May as part of the 2010 budget reduction plan. For the most recent 12-month period through July 2010, Accessoride ridership was up 11% and Able Ride was down 2.5% compared to the prior 12-month period. As indicated in the ridership summary on page 14, when compared to the 2010 mid-year forecast levels, Accessoride ridership was lower than forecasted by 1.7%, and Able Ride ridership was equal to forecast for the year-to-date through July. Farebox revenue for Accessoride was 3.6% lower than the mid-year forecast for the July year-to-date. Able Ride farebox revenue was 0.4% better than the mid-year forecast levels for the year-to-date through July. Returning to page 13, requests for service in July increased by 3.2% for Accessoride and decreased by 18.1% for Able Ride compared to July 2009. The 12-month period requests for service increased 10.8% for Accessoride and were down 2.3% for Able Ride. Trips completed were up 3.2% for Accessoride and down by 18.2% for Able Ride in July 2010 when compared to July 2009. For the last 12 months, completed trips were up 10.8% for Accessoride and down 2.2% for Able Ride when compared to the prior 12-month period. The favorable trend regarding passenger no-shows as a percentage of scheduled trips continued for Accessoride in July, as there were 13.9% fewer no-shows compared to the last year. However, Able Ride passenger no-shows went from 2.3% to 2.79%, an increase of 20.3% in July 2010 compared to July 2009. This increase is primarily attributed to the customer confusion over the elimination of the non-ADA routes. I'd like to introduce Tom Del Sorbo to present the ridership.
So do you think we could have done a better job in introducing those routes?
I think there was a lot of confusion based on the fact that they have a much larger reservation window than Accessoride. They got 6 to 7 days, and we were honoring all of those trips, but I think the customers felt that with, I guess, all the information that was going around, that they might be stranded, and we probably could have done a better outreach job in convincing them that the service was still in place at that time.
So we've learned for the future?
We've learned, and I think that when we go to the following month, you'll see that the confusion is pretty much out of the system.
For granted.
Yes.
Okay, next.
Good morning. I'll begin with the Ridership Report on page 12 of the committee book. Total fixed route ridership decreased by 3.3 for the month of July in comparison to July 2009. For the 12-month period, total ridership was down by 3.2 as compared to the previous 12 months. Year-to-date, MTA bus ridership exceeds mid-year forecast levels by 2%. Long Island bus is 0.1% better than the forecast, and ridership for Transit's Department of Buses is 0.5% lower than forecast. On a combined level, average weekday ridership was down 0.2% for July and 2.4% for the 12-month period. Weekend ridership was down 1.7 for the month of July and 4% for the 12-month period. Now, regarding the impact of the bus service reductions that were implemented on June 27th, MTA Bus actually recorded a 3% increase in average weekday ridership and a 1.8% increase in average weekend ridership in July 2010 over July 2009 levels. In MTA Bus, the increase was strictly in local bus ridership, as average express bus ridership fell by 0.3. Long Island Bus in July, after the service reductions, average weekday ridership dropped by only 0.2% as compared to July 2009, and weekend ridership fell by 1%. This slight decrease reflects the elimination of very low volume routes in the June 27 service reductions. In New York City Transit Bus, average weekday ridership fell in July by 0.7%, and weekend ridership fell by 2.2%, reflecting the more substantial service reductions there. Weekday local bus ridership decreased by 0.7% from July 2009, and weekday express fell by 4% in July. We have preliminary August data for ridership, and it generally indicates similar trends as we saw in the July 2010 results after the service reductions. MTA Bus average weekday ridership again rose 2.8 in August 2010 over August 2009. This increase was all in local ridership, as local bus ridership was up 3.1, but express bus was down 1.2 in MTA Bus. On weekends in August, MTA Bus ridership rose 4.4, with gains both on the local and the express side. In Long Island Bus, August weekday ridership actually increased by 0.4% as compared to 2009 in August, and average weekend ridership increased by 3.6 in August. This represented a reversal of the trend we saw in Long Island Bus in July that immediately followed the service reductions. In New York City Transit Bus, average weekday ridership in August fell by 1.4%, and weekend ridership fell by 1.6 as compared to August 2009. Weekday local bus ridership fell by 1.4, and weekday express ridership decreased by 3.6% in August from prior year levels. On to the finance report, which we have... Question? Sure.
You want to go, Pat? I find it interesting, and just looking at the numbers, that on Long Island Bus, weekday ridership exceeds weekend ridership, and yet on the Transit Authority and MTA Bus, weekend ridership exceeds weekday ridership. Is there a,
No.
at least I'm looking at the number, that's how I'm looking at them, unless I missed something somewhere.
No.
I think you have to realize when weekend we mean combined Saturday and Sunday. So that's just the characteristics of a more urban system versus
No, I
a
understand
suburban.
that. It was interesting to me that one would think that even in the city, weekday ridership would exceed weekend ridership, but it's very interesting how that works its way out in that regard. But it does show the difference between a suburban system and an urban system in that regard as to the correlations between employment and bus ridership, or other aspects in the city where people take the bus not just for employment opportunities, but that tends to be the largest factor in the suburban system.
In looking on page 12 for the month of July, it looks like average weekday ridership is about 102,000, 103,000 for LIB, and weekend is just under 92,000.
Right.
So it's a slight edge to the weekday, but
Right.
not significant.
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Tom, are you saying that if we decreased express bus local service, the overall ridership for local express bus increased? It looked like we reduced about 2%, but total ridership increased about 2%. Should we try another 2% cut and see what happens?
Not on the express side, though.
No.
The express side went down, the local side went up. It depending
Right.
on MTA Bus, it did.
Yeah, it said local express.
What does that mean? No, if you reduce the local, another 2%, won't overall ridership on local go up another 2%, or is this just limited to the first cut?
Well, an MTA bus, local ridership is about 10 times the average than express bus ridership overall.
Yeah, I think you have
Given
to
day.
I think you have to realize the differences in the nature of the service changes that were made, much more significant in transit than they were in MTA bus and Long Island bus for various reasons. And that's part of the reason for the difference. Hopefully that helps.
Sorry, a quick question on page 13 about Able Ride. Following the reduction, or the elimination rather, of certain non-ADA required Able Ride rides, which took effect July 1st, there was a 17% reduction in both ridership and revenue. That makes sense. What percentage of the non-ADA required, or A or B, the total Able Ride routes did that represent, or miles served? What, 17, higher or lower?
Actually, when the budget reduction was presented, and I'll let Steve sort of give the details, but I believe that the non-ADA trips were between 9 and 10% of the overall 2009 trips based on the data that LI Paratransit had.
It was about 10. It was about 10% of the total service up to that point.
So we reduced 10% of the service, but affected 17% of the customers?
Of the ride,
In the non-ADA
of the
required.
ridership,
In the
correct.
first month or so following the implementation of it, it looks like that
Right.
17% drop as opposed to the 10% piece.
And we expect, we expect that trend to continue.
We'll see as it unfolds,
Okay.
but it may show that, you know, the trend doesn't continue and that it comes back to closer to the 10%.
Thank you.
Okay, on to finance, which is summarized on page 14. Preliminary financial results show that fixed route farebox revenue for July 2010 was 7.6 better than the mid-year forecast in MTA bus, 1.9% worse than the forecast in New York City Transit bus, and 0.9% better than the mid-year forecast for Long Island bus. Year-to-date, MTA bus is running 1% better than forecast for farebox revenue. Long Island bus is 0.6 above budget, and Department of Buses is less than 0.8 above forecast through July. On the expense side, year-to-date through July, for MTA bus, accrued actual non-reimbursable expenses before all non-cash adjustments were $18.1 million worse than mid-year forecast levels. The entire overrun was attributable to a substantial revision in the accrued amount of public liability claims, which was issued in a third-party actuarial estimate after the mid-year forecast was developed and finalized. Milliman, who is the actuary doing that work, has revised the reserve amount for MTA bus to more accurately reflect the liability exposure there, now that they have data that's more specific for MTA bus.
Basically, they were using the, I'm not defending them. I'm not defending them, and I'm not defending you for not picking it up. But basically, the actuary was basing the figures on the size of Long Island bus, not on the size of this new megabus corporation we have. So that's where the 20 million shortfall in estimate went for the liability claims. So that's the bad news. We have good news later about overtime.
We do. Actual non-reimbursable expenses in Long Island bus, $1.4 million better.
Where are we going to find that 20 million?
Well, it's an accrual amount. It's a reserve that has to be essentially matched. I mean, we have our general counsel here who can more specifically detail that. Cheryl Hartel.
That's a reserve amount. It's not actual money in case of a trial or a settle. So
Right.
if it comes in higher or lower than that, it's going to take a period of time before we catch up to that amount.
Okay.
A reserve amount is not money that we're going to have to be paying out next year.
Okay. For New York City Transit bus, non-reimbursable expenses were $35.2 million better than forecast year-to-date. So in total, through July, combined budget underrun for the 3 bus units, including paratransit operations, is $18.5 million, favorable to the mid-year forecast. That's the end of the finance report. On to procurements, beginning on page 59.
Everybody want to look at the procurements and see if anyone has any questions?
There are 2.
I move that the procurements be adopted.
All in favor?
Aye.
For the spun service changes, we'll turn the floor over to Norm Silverman.
Better. This month, there's a total of 5 service changes included as information items beginning on page 64. 1 service change for MTA Bus, 1 for Long Island Bus, and 3 for New York City Transit Department of Buses. They are listed as follows: a revision in the last westbound stop in Midtown Manhattan for express routes BM1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. A very minor northbound travel path revision in Far Rockaway for the N31 and N32. A restructuring of peak period service on express routes X27 and X28 in Manhattan. Changes to the M3 and M100 routes at St. Nicholas Avenue and Amsterdam Avenue in Upper Manhattan. And rerouting of the M9 at the northern terminal adjacent to the Veterans Administration Hospital. Details of all the service changes are contained in the staff summaries and submitted to the committee. This month's agenda also includes, as information items, reports on service quality indicators and the passenger environment survey for the first half of 2010 for the New York City Transit Department of Buses. We are prepared to answer any questions the committee may have on any of the service changes or on the service quality indicators and the passenger environment survey included in this month's agenda.
Okay. The committee agenda also includes as information this month the monthly allocation of the 2010 mid-year forecast for MTA and Long Island Bus. The Department of Buses forecast and monthly allocation data is part of New York City Transit's consolidated mid-year forecast. Now it's on to President Smith to deliver the presentation on overtime.
Okay. The MTA's 2010 adopted budget incorporated an aggressive $24 million reduction in overtime spending. In May 2010, the MTA announced plans to exceed the target by an additional $22 million in overtime savings. As you will hear today, we are on track to exceed the 2010 target and save an additional $54 million. MTA-wide projected overtime spending is $54 million less than 2009 levels, an 11% decrease. The 3 bus agencies account for $24 million, or 44% of the MTA-wide overtime savings. 40% or $63 million of the $159 million projected for 2010 overtime spending is scheduled transportation overtime designed to optimize a reliable bus service. The following pages outline the various actions we are taking to address the level of overtime costs within buses. The 3 main areas of focus we are pursuing closely with headquarters to control overtime spending in buses and ensure that such spending reductions they continue in the future. One is we're going to limit overtime to service critical needs only, improve employee availability, and focus on reduction in higher earner overtime. Limiting overtime to service crucial needs means we took a hard look on what we're doing to improve maintenance productivity and reduce unscheduled maintenance work requirements. For example, we have decreased work times on brake relines and incorporating these savings into the November 2010 financial plan. Basically, what we've done, relines we do over 6,000 relines a year, and they're expensive. They're a job that is not only material driven, it's labor driven. So what we've done is we've gotten machines in now that there's a brake shoe and there's brake linings, and instead of in the past we would have a maintainer come in and he would use a impact wrench and he would pull the brake shoes apart. Now we have a machine, we purchased a machine that we have centrally located. All the brake shoes go up to this location. This brake shoe is then placed in this machine. You hit a button and a blade comes down and slices the lining right off. So it's much quicker, it saves us time, and at the end of the day, we get a better product out of it. In addition to brake reline tasks, we are working with headquarters on other potential maintenance savings opportunities, such as air conditioning, transmission, radiators, and scheduled inspections, work scopes. We are also focusing on 6 depot hotspots We're working to track the overtime intensity of the maintenance operations in these 6 depots, and we're documenting on a daily basis why decisions are made to spend, to use overtime. This analysis will guide us in determining what could be done to reduce overtime utilization going forward. One of the other things we're doing to improve employee availability is we're intensely monitoring our IOD cases and assigning productivity to employees who are waiting the results of their fitness for duty results. We've also rolled out a program where we do random drug testing. And in the past, everyone had to go to a MAC center or get on a train or a bus and go all the way to Brooklyn to get their results, and you could lose that employee for most of the day. Now we're doing the random drug testing right at the facility and getting the employee back to work as with a minimum loss to your operations. We're also looking at our high overtime earners. And high overtime earners represent a significant driver of pension costs. We're focusing on the timely replacement of hiring operational vacancies to reduce our reliance on overtime to maintain the critical service levels. We're taking a hard look at how work is scheduled. We have eliminated where we have scheduled work assignments that are greater than 8-hour tours. And especially in areas of shifting and unit repair, we're looking to see how we get away from the 10-hour tours and get back to 8-hour tours, and we've done that basically across the board. So to summarize, we have a $24 million saving in 2010 as compared to the 2009 overtime spending in buses. Our overtime in the targeted hotspots is down by 18%. We're on track to reduce the earnings of the top 60 bus overtime earners by $270,000 this year, or 10% as compared to last year. And one of the things, in spite of all this overtime savings that we've managed to do, we've also had one of the roughest summers in recent memory, and our air conditioning performance was rather good. There was no publicity, nothing in the papers about poor bus air conditioning. We really did really well. And if you look in the book, our local bus passenger environmental survey, cleanliness-wise, we're probably the cleanest we've ever been on the local bus side, because we put in a new program that we self-funded in-house, where we started to wash bus interiors every 30 days. We've broken those interior washes and exterior washes away from an inspection cycle. So instead of being done every mileage driven or time driven, where they're up to 90 days, we're doing them now every 30 days, once a month. So that concludes our remarks.
Well, thank you for the good news. Pat had a question, and I think it was your, well, first, I'm stealing this question from you. I think it was your question in the Long Island Railroad. If any of is that your question again? Because I thought that was such a good question, but you're welcome to ask.
Please go.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because I'm on overtime now, actually.
Any part of the reduction in overtime, which is good and welcome news, come from service reductions, either in the budget for 10 or in the projections year to date?
Most of the reductions are in maintenance, but it is a possibility. It encompasses transportation and maintenance, so there could be some transportation-related savings in the overtime, because the numbers that are in there are from actual 2009 expenses to our projection for the full year for 2010. So it could encompass either side of the house.
No, because I was surprised when the railroad said none of it was from service cuts. Yeah.
One quick question, Joe. Could you just talk about the important and critical role that Long Island Bus plays in the event of acts of God, the fire at the Jamaica Station, the hurricane that didn't come, the tornado that did?
Long Island Bus.
In terms of supplementing railroad service when it's disrupted,
we probably did for the fire. We probably that week put out about 400 buses that week, and for the tornado, windstorm, whatever you want to call that, we put out, probably Long Island Bus put out an additional 50 buses to 100 buses, probably Thursday into Friday into Saturday into Sunday, while everything got cleaned up. So Long Island Bus helps tremendously to mop up when situations do not allow the railroad to operate.
two questions. Out of the top 60 overtime culprits, what percentage of them are nearing retirement?
There's also, I don't know, but Tom can answer that one.
More than half.
But there's also a percentage of the people, like an MTA bus, the pension is not a final average salary pension. So their last year doesn't reflect on what their actual pension earnings would be.
Second question. I understand that after laying off a lot of bus drivers, we've now had to go back and hire back 100 of them. Was that because the overtime to pay other drivers to pick up the slack was so high, or did we just simply, and did we rehire the same people that we fired, or we now have to train new people?
What we've done is on the TA side of the house, which the hiring list is civil service controlled. During the summer, the service dropped off. In September, we went up in service because of school opening and other reasons why. And we generally have about 45 bus operators a month in attrition that we lose. On the MAPSTOA side, that did not happen. The service did not go up in September, so we didn't have to hire a large amount there. We did hire about 120 bus operators back into the system. But in the meantime, the OA and TA bus operators that were laid off, we actually were hiring them in the MTA bus company because their attrition continues every single month. So we brought a lot of people back, not only through normal attrition on the TA side, but through normal attrition in MTA bus. We started them off as brand new employees, though, in the MTA bus side.
And finally, can you give me an example of one of these hot spots in the maintenance area? Can you give an example of what you're trying to curb, what sort of behavior you're trying to curb there?
In certain depots, what we have is we have vacancies through whatever reason, and the same person comes up for overtime every day, and what we've done now is we are quickly addressing that vacancy, and we're filling that vacancy so we don't generate overtime within our own system. You have a critical need, you have to have somebody on a tow truck, so if there's a vacancy every night because that person retired, we move quickly to fill that vacancy so we stop that automatic generating of the overtime.
Doreen, I think I would just add that in conjunction with HQ, we are monitoring, we actually have supervisors and managers at these hotspots recording each overtime instance. What is the reason for it? Is it to make tomorrow morning service? Is it because we have a campaign that we have to fix broken windows, etc.? So we're basically breaking down the overtime work into different categories and codes that on a form that HQ has developed for almost all of these hotspots across the agencies. So we're trying to monitor what is behind the decision, A, to grant overtime, and then B, why are we using it, and what is the outcome of using it? Did we make full service or not?
I think you have to be very careful focusing on the 60 top overtime earners, because you guys are unique, because most of your overtime, I think, is what I call good overtime or scheduled overtime. Because you have to accommodate both ends of a rush hour, sometimes it pays somebody to work an extra hour or two rather than filling it up with a whole extra shift. And you probably want to call in the same people time and time again to do that, because it's still a lot less expensive than hiring somebody to complete the shift. Bridges and Tunnels, on the other hand, doesn't have that same ratio of good overtime that you do. All of theirs is probably less productive overtime. But that's why if you focus on the guys rather than on the scheduled overtime, and I don't know whether you can break it down into non-scheduling or bad overtime as opposed to good overtime, but you guys, whenever you show big overtime numbers, I think everybody now really understands it.
What we do is we focus on the reason why that person is there a reason why that person is earning the overtime? That's what we're doing. And the fact that we got 44% of the whole MTA's overtime savings is a big tribute to the people sitting here, and I thank them. And on top of that, we still manage to put the service out every day.
Okay. Any other questions? I regretfully have to inform you that we're 7 minutes late, but I am a motion to adjourn.
Scheduled or not scheduled?
Okay, see ya.